It's time to take off your clothes, enjoy clothes-free living, and join us for Naked, Nudist, and Naturist.
Welcome to Naked, Nudist, and Naturist, the show that celebrates clothes-free living for all. I'm your host, Frank Stone.
And I'm your correspondent, Lisa Monroe, and I'll be reporting on all things within the Naturist community. So it's time to get naked and join us.
And enjoy clothes-free living on Naked, Nudists, and Naturists. Well, greetings and welcome in to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, episode 87 today. Really glad that you are here. We've been waiting 167 hours for you to come back, and you are here, we are here, ready to enjoy clothes-free living for all the right reasons for the next hour. So come on in. The pool is fine, the hot tub is fired up, the grill is going full bore, fruits and vegetables off to the right, cold drinks off to the left, hot drinks inside, cigar bar in the back left corner of the pool, and courtesy of one of our listeners from Canada, we now have a La San Marco espresso machine, as he says, so our community may enjoy a lovely double espresso, large cappuccino, or for those listening where it's hot, iced cappuccino. How about that for a deal on Naked, Nudists, and Naturists? In just a moment, we will have an audio clip from Naturism author Jason Stern. He has a brand new book out we want you to check out. Lisa Monroe will be here. We'll talk about a variety of issues, including the latest campaign from the AANR, this one about loneliness. And then we'll have part one of my interview with the man I call Mr. Nudism. He's all over the place spreading the word. He currently works with the International Naturist Federation. Everybody knows him, HECTOR Martinez. Glad you're here, Naked Nudists and Naturists, episode 87. And now an audio clip from Naturism author Jason Stern.
Hello, everyone. It's such a joy to be here on the Triple N podcast among friends who share a passion for naturism. Special thanks to Frank for hosting me. My name is Jason Stern, and I'm excited to introduce you to my latest book, Between Sun and Skin. It's a story I'm very excited about, and I believe it has the power to resonate with many of you. Let me start by answering the question, who is this book for, and why would I write it? Well, I'm a father of 8 girls. Yeah, a girl dad for sure. My wife and I have 5 daughters who are currently in the young adult age group that the book is written in. I wanted to write a book like I've not seen before and that my daughters and your daughters could all relate to. Our girls are facing a culture that tells them that they are not enough, a culture that still treats them as commodities, and a culture that often self-censors because it's afraid of living in the light. Between Sun and Skin is for them. And it's for anyone who believes in body positivity, self-acceptance, and the beauty of living authentically. It builds a framework that allows space to talk about things we don't always like talking about, emotional, physical vulnerability, to push back against those constant messages that tell all of us that we're not enough. Now let me tell you what inspired it. As some of you may know, my first book, Renewed Life, explored biblical insights into nudity and reminded us that our bodies are fearfully and wonderfully made. That book was designed to answer those questions we all have about the verses on nudity in the Bible. Renewed Life defines the different kinds of nudity found in Scripture and provides clear insight into the idioms and cultural settings where nudity is found throughout the books of the Old Testament and New Testament. For people who follow the way of Jesus, it's very important that everything we do be grounded in biblical truth. And we found that reclaiming the spiritual and emotional freedom that comes from seeing ourselves as God intended is a real breakthrough opportunity. Between Sun and Skin takes that message in a new direction. It's a fictional story about 2 sisters, Marie and Bex, on very different journeys. The book is written in a unique format. Marie is the adventurous older sister, a photojournalist traveling the world and discovering cultures that embrace the natural human form in ways that are freeing and beautiful. She is writing about her adventures for the travel magazine she works for and sharing personal correspondence through letters to her younger sister Bex back home. One thing that I think is fun is that everything Marie experiences is real. Every opportunity she encounters in her travels, every person she talks to, and every statistic she offers, they're all real places and real information. Meanwhile, back home, Bex is wrestling with her own insecurities. She's someone who's grown up in a world full of mixed messages about her body, and she struggles to see herself as enough. Bex shares her private journal entries as well as letters back to Marie, And through the writings, Bex begins her own transformation, learning to embrace who she is and discovering the joy of living without shame. She ends up having some pretty crazy adventures of her own. I won't spoil it for you, but I've been told by several readers that they stayed up all night finishing the book because they couldn't put it down. So, what's the idea behind it? I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, I read everything. I loved adventure stories, mystery, and science fiction. I read the entire collection of the Hardy Boys, Trixie Belden books, and Nancy Drew series. Our kids today love to read too. We spend lots of time checking out books at the library, and when we look at the offerings out there today in the YA category, they're not the wholesome, adventurous stories they used to be. They now feature a lot of sex and violence and more adult themes. I wanted to find a book that would inspire my girls, that would give them foundational truths and also share a simple yet profound message. God made our bodies good. Our bodies are not the problem. The problem is the shame that society attaches to them. I couldn't find that book, so I decided to write it. Through Marie and Beck's stories, Between Sun and Skin explores how simple naturism, as a wholesome practice, can help us reconnect with ourselves, our communities, and the world around us. My wife and daughters, as well as several additional reviewers, helped me with valuable feedback all along the way to writing this book to make sure that it reads well. You definitely fall in love with how real the characters are. They seem like people you'd want in your life, people you'd enjoy spending time with. I hope this book sparks lots of conversations. I hope it inspires those who already embrace naturism to share their journey with others, especially the younger generation, who may need a little encouragement. I hope it reaches people who have never considered naturism and opens their minds to the idea that there's a better, freer way to live. I hope it gives words to thoughts that readers have been mulling over in their hearts, and maybe gives them courage to try something new. Between Sun and Skin is a gateway to a new universe and freedom. It's a celebration of the values we already hold dear as naturists, and a bridge to help others understand the joy and liberation of embracing our natural selves. Friends, thanks so much for letting me share this new book with you. I'm excited for you to read the book, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep this momentum going, and together we can continue to inspire the world to live free and unashamed. You can find the book, both Between Sun and Skin and Renewed Life, on Amazon.com or on my website, renewedlife.com.
And there you go, Naturism author Jason Stern. Check out his new book. We appreciate having him on, but for right now, I think I hear some music. Do you hear it? That can only mean one thing. It's time for the great, the terrific, the one-of-a-kind Lisa Monroe. And here she is, the one and only, the completely clothes-free, completely smiling, and was completely dancing until she just sat down, our Naturism correspondent, Lisa Monroe. Good morning, Lisa. How are you today?
Good morning, Frank. I'm doing terrific, and it's a gorgeous day, and I think it's time to dance and have a good time.
Absolutely. I was thinking every time I bring you in, well, right before the music starts, and as I bring you in, I always say, Lisa Monroe. Do you ever get that anywhere else in life? Like, you go to the grocery store, the deli, you place an order. Do they ever say, I have the order for Lisa Monroe? Or am I the only one who does that?
You do realize I'm infamous, don't you? So I get it everywhere. And you also know that I'm kidding. So, no, I believe you are the only person who bellows out my name
Okay.
when I arrive.
Or the Amazon driver shows up, I have a package for Lisa Monroe. That only goes on here? Okay.
Yes,
Right.
we are sometimes Looney Tunes, and that's pretty much fun. I like it.
And by the way, you said you're infamous. That's actually a bad thing. Being infamous means you're famous for something negative.
Yes.
But which is not you. So you're just famous. Let's put it out there,
Yes,
right?
that's it. That's it. I'm just, I'm a star. What can I tell you?
That's right.
No, good Lord, please, people don't think that's
no,
true.
I can vouch to the fact that you're kidding. There's no
I am.
attitude at all with you. Well, we have, as we mentioned on most shows now, we'll try to mention this on every show as long as I don't forget. We do have a Patreon page, and everybody knows why. We were giving up paid work to do this for free. Not the brightest move ever, but now we're asking for Patreon members to help support the show, pay the expenses. We'll never make up what we've lost, but we are making up enough to cover the expenses. And whatever you can give, we appreciate it. We give you a brand new show every Saturday. And as I said on a recent show, you don't get that anywhere else. I guess I ticked a few people off. But, Lisa, it's true. Every blasted Saturday. For
Mm-hmm.
now 87 straight Saturdays, we've given a 1 hour show, and we give content 7 days a week. So it's not an inappropriate thing to say. And if somebody got ticked, well, you can join us and do a 1 hour show every week, and we'll include you.
The fact is that we do what we do, and
Yeah.
so it's that we do it every week is just part of who we are. So
Yeah.
what everybody else does, I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes if I breathe or take a drink of water, there's somebody out there in the world, I won't be too specific, who thinks we're taking a shot at him. No, I'm just having a
Yeah,
glass of water. No big deal.
no, no.
Anyway, with our Patreon people, we have a couple of people you wanted to mention this morning. Take it away.
I sure do. There's Constant, and I hope I pronounced that correct. I probably did not, but welcome aboard. And Martin has joined Patreon, so we really appreciate that. And as you often say, there are a lot of people who join who do not want their name,
Yeah.
even their short name, put
Yeah.
on the air. So there's a whole bunch of other people, and we would like to tell them we appreciate them being here.
Yeah, absolutely, including the gentleman from Michigan who will be the guest on
Mm,
our show in a few
yes,
weeks. So if
yes.
you don't want your name out there, we don't put it out there. We protect all privacy. So we thank people for supporting us through Patreon, patreon.com. Type in Naked Nudist and Naturist. The link is also in the show notes. And how about merchandise? We sell a lot of merchandise around here for the show. And Lisa, how are we doing there? Anything you want to report?
Well, we're doing really well there, and I'm really appreciative of the people who've joined in getting T-shirts and coffee cups and um, beach towels. I love that they're getting the beach towels because the beach towels are gorgeous. And we also have something new. Well, it's been on there for a while, but those can cozies, that you put on your Coke can or beer
Hmm.
can or whatever,
Hmm.
and they look really good, and they are really doing well. So there's some good stuff there.
Okay. And to get a hold of Naked Nudist and Naturist or NNN merchandise, what's the best way to do that?
The best way is to go to our website, and there is a page that says NNN Shop.
All
Go
right.
there, and there's a whole bunch of things. And just remember, people, that if you look at something, check because you can get them in a lot of different colors.
Hmm.
So if you don't want a black shirt or a white shirt that's shown on the screen, look at the drop down menu and pick the color of your choice.
All right. Well, thank you for doing all that. And
Mhm.
we appreciate those who have taken interest and purchased items. I want to bring up something we talked about a lot. I don't even know when, last summer, last fall, whenever. And then we kind of dropped it for a while, not intentionally, but people have asked, what about this whole shirt free men for all thing? Why do men wear shirts ever? Why do you wear a shirt when you walk to the mailbox, assuming the weather's, halfway decent? And so, no, we haven't gotten away from that. We just
No.
moved on to other things, but it's still there. And where I am, it's about 75 to 80 degrees every day in the warm part of the day. That's
Mhm.
perfect shirt free weather. Perfect shirt free weather for all, but legally for men. And eventually we'll get women there too. Any thoughts on that, Lisa?
Well, I was going to say it's legal for you,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not for me.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much frowned on if I wanted to walk out of the house and go to the grocery store in a bikini top.
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't like that either.
Yeah.
So, and you can get away with it maybe in Florida a little bit because people are used to being outdoors in bathing suits
Mhm.
but yeah, it's it is perfect weather, and unfortunately we can't join you.
Yeah.
But I'm glad guys do because they should be able to.
Yeah, and we encourage them to do that. You can do it. You can legally do it. Do it. And I'm speaking from a position of a guy who has often worn a shirt outside. And I finally caught myself last year. What am I doing? Why do I have a shirt on? This is the most ridiculous thing ever. And obviously, you want to protect yourself against the elements. If it's too cold, too hot,
Yeah,
you don't want to overexpose your skin to the sun.
no,
But when you can, you ought to be out there. I wish clothes free, but certainly shirt free for the men. And eventually we'll get there for the women, right?
I sure hope so. And yes, it's just we know that being in the outdoors and being clothes free is a marvelous feeling. It's in touch with your whole body's in touch with the sun and the breeze, and so it's just a wonderful thing. So eventually we'll get there.
Yeah, that's right. Also, wanted to mention briefly, and we will dive into this more heavily soon, Lisa Monroe. I don't know if it'll be next week or whenever. We'll get to it. This whole naturism versus exhibitionism thing. And I've had some really intensive conversations with some guests who will be coming up on the show soon. And there are a lot of people angry about this, that people are co opting the word naturism or co opting nudism for what they really want to do, which is just to show their parts and swing and have inappropriate relations with as many people as possible in a given evening. And yeah, I'm a little bit ticked about that too. I have been for a long time. Quit calling yourself a nudist or a naturist if the only thing you want to do is have people look at your naked body. That is not a nudist. And we have a guest coming up soon who explains he doesn't think there's a nudist anywhere who gets naked for the purpose of being seen. We get nude for the purpose of enjoying clothes free living for all the right reasons. Any comments or thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with the fact that there's certainly a difference between them, and I remember someone commented or liked a tweet that we are ex whatever they called,
Mhm.
post, and clearly labeled herself, had her ID name, and then underneath it was exhibitionist. So at least she was being honest about it,
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, that's good.
because a lot of people aren't. And
Right.
if people are milling about a nature's resort, and they take pictures, or at a meeting and they take pictures, that's great, because that shows the camaraderie, and that shows who we are and what we're doing. But the people who just say, "Oh, hi, I did this today," no,
Yeah,
I think there's a very fine line, and I think it's probably where you stand on, close to that line, that it's worrisome. But I think it's something worth discussing.
yeah, and we will bring it up in a little more detail down the road. Just want to introduce it today. The next thing, Lisa, we've talked about this a lot, is the American Association for Nude Recreation. We are the official podcast, as everybody knows by now, and we have been since the summer of 2023. They started a new campaign. They're going to, through the marketing committee, George runs that, something new every month to promote naturism, nudism, and of course, Anner as well. And for this month, they kicked it off on February 12th, but we already had our shows done by then because I had to run out of town. And we got the shows done early. So we're bringing it up today, and it has to do with what they call combating the loneliness epidemic. And they say, recognizing that it's a serious problem, Anna is committed to combating loneliness by providing both in person events and online opportunities for members to gather, connect, and develop a greater sense of belonging to the nudist community. Do you mind reading the next two paragraphs?
No, not at all. Mental health benefits of being part of a vibrant social community cannot be overstated. When people become socially disconnected, they are at serious risk of anxiety and depression. They have a higher risk of heart disease, dementia, and stroke. Researchers have also found that social isolation increases the risk of premature death by almost 30%. It's been proven that people who are part of a social circle and have a few friends are more positive about life, suffer less depression, and are more engaged than those who have isolated lives. In other words, the socially connected tend to experience a greater joy of life than the socially isolated.
All right, and then jumping down the page, actually to the next page. The good news is you have the opportunity to build new social circles and friendships by connecting with the Anna nudist community. And they give a lot of examples as to how you can do this. You're sitting home, you're alone. How can I connect with the greater nudist community? Maybe you have no idea. That's part of why we're here, and obviously why Anna is here. The first one is in person connection opportunities. And the first one they mention is join a non landed nudist social club. There are nudist clubs. You go to a physical place, you go to a physical building whenever you go. Non landed would mean you don't have a physical place, it rotates around. Maybe, Joe will host it this week and Mary will host it the week after. Not a bad way to go, right? There are
No.
many of them out there. We've talked about starting one. Eventually we will.
Yeah.
But that's a great way to connect, isn't it?
It is certainly a great way to connect, and I think that we've discovered by a lot of our um, guests, especially, and the listeners that we have who've written in, that some of them don't even know all of this exists. They've been naturists at home, they've stumbled on the show, and now all of a sudden they're going, "Oh, I'm going to go to a club next week," or "I'm going to, go do this," and it's wonderful because then they're branching out and seeing that there are social opportunities for them.
Yeah.
and they don't feel as isolated. And even though they may have a circle of friends who are textile friends,
Hmm.
they don't have people of like ilk, and that sometimes is what you need.
Yeah. And they also talk about you can become an Anner ambassador, and you can find that out anner.com/Anner hyphen ambassadors. And then they list a bunch of nudist events for 2025. We'll just kind of go through the list here. Nudist Festival and Car Show events, World Naked Gardening Day in May, National Nude and Nature Day in June, Nude Recreation Week, and National Skinny Dipping Day in July. And we also have Women in Nude Recreation in July. And then we have a bunch of conventions coming up. Like every region has a convention throughout the year. We won't give all those dates, but they're available on Anner. And if you go down, Lisa, where it says online connection opportunities, what are you looking at there?
Well, this online is listing some things that you can just do from your home if you're not able to get out or you don't have time to do one of these other events. Anna has a wonderful thing called a monthly Zoom meet and greet calls where you just get on Zoom and chat with people who are naturists, and that way you can have a lot of questions answered. You can talk about your experiences, find out what people are doing, and that's a good way to connect. Then sign up for the Undressed Press newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
I love that name.
Yeah.
And that's our monthly newsletter that features nudists in the news and places to go, and so more information for you. And if you want to really become involved, write an article for
Mm-hmm.
the Enter website.
Mm-hmm.
Who you are and why you're a naturist is important and interesting to all of us. We all want to know how we got here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an excellent way to do that. And so if you're inclined to write, that would be wonderful. And also interact with the existing articles, comment, do those kinds of things.
Right.
And because that way, then that gives you a feel that you're part of the community.
And also, they mention Naturist Hub social network. You can join that. Nudist Clubhouse. They talk about naturist podcasters. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but we are the official podcast, the American Association for Nude Recreation. We're here every Saturday,
Yes,
actually
we are.
7 days a week. Follow naturist vloggers, people who put video out there, a lot of those, naturist bloggers. And at the end, if you don't mind reading that conclusion, and then we will head for the hills.
Develop a sense of belonging. Don't live a lonely life of isolation. Get connected. If you are a person who is open to clothing-free recreation and being nude amongst other nude humans, we encourage you to take advantage of the opportunities ANR is providing to get connected to the naturist community.
All right, very good. And all that information is available at AANR.com. And get connected, find somebody. If you're lonely, no need to be lonely. We're out here for you. That's why we do a show every week. And even through Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's and Easter, we're still here because people get lonely. And Lisa Monroe, with that, we do have to head for the hills. Go out there and have a great clothes-free week.
And I certainly will, and you too.
Sounds good.
Take care, everyone.
You bet. You bet. The very terrific Lisa Monroe. She does it all around here, and we appreciate everything that Lisa Monroe does. As a reminder, we are the official podcast for the American Association for Nude Recreation. Are you a member? If so, great. If not, you can become one today. Just go to AANR.com, follow the navigation, and just like Lisa Monroe and just like myself, you will become a member. How about that? Well, you are listening to Naked Nudists and Naturists, episode 87 today. And now let's get to part one of my interview with a guy I call Mr. Nudism, the communications director for the International Naturist Federation. He's all over social media. Everybody knows him. Part one of my interview with the very terrific HECTOR MARTINEZ. We are headed to Mexico this morning. We are going to talk to the guy I am going to name, at least for the show. I didn't have his permission to do this. I'm going to call him Mr. Nudism, Mr. Naturism, because he is all over the place. He's one of the first people we noticed around here when we started the show. As we began to surf through Twitter and other social media, we found a number of people, and this gentleman is certainly one of them. He's the past president of the Mexican Nudist Federation. He's all over social media. He's also the current communications director for the International Naturist Federation. So let's welcome from Mexico, HECTOR MARTINEZ. Good morning, HECTOR. How are you today, sir?
Good morning, Frank. I'm not sure if I would be worthy of the title of Mr. Naturism, but I definitely enjoy spending time without any clothes on and sharing that experience with the world.
All right.
Um, so thank you, and I'm honored to be here.
Well, you bet. I mean, there are titles out there. There's Mr. America, there's Mr. Olympia. You know, you deserve a title too, Hector. So we'll just call you Mr. Nudism, Mr. Naturism. Obviously, just having fun. That's not an official title or something you've ever gone for, but you're out there all the time and you're very highly and strongly encouraging of other people to get involved in naturism as well for all the right reasons, aren't you?
Thank you. I like to think so. I believe that naturism has given me so many benefits, both personal, physical, emotional, psychological. And my mission in life is just to share that with as many people as possible, because I believe that everyone would benefit from feeling more comfortable in their skin.
Oh yeah, yeah, big time. As I told you right before we started recording, when we started the show back in 2023, we were looking on social media to get the general lay of the land and find people to interview. And one of the first ones to pop up was Linda Weber. She had a couple of videos at the top of her page, fully nude, out in nature near a brook or a streaming river or something, and she was explaining what naturism meant to her. And I thought, well, whoever this lady is, she really has her acting gear. So we got a hold of her and got her on the show. She was one of our early on guests. And she told me, and she's told me this more than once, that she owes a lot to you as far as getting her the confidence to try naturism, to become involved. And she's even referred to you as a mentor, as a teacher for naturism. So that's got to make you feel pretty good. The current president of the American Association for Nude Recreation owes a lot of her success, in her words, to Hector Martinez. How about that?
I think Linda has always been very sweet. She's a really nice, really good friend. And I don't believe I'm worthy of that title, to be honest with you. But I do remember that several years ago, I had a campaign going on Twitter. I don't remember exactly what the campaign was, but I
Mhm.
did reach out to several people that were active on Twitter back then. Linda was very active. And from the beginning, she always was very committed to naturism and a very specific type of naturism. And so I invited her, and she told me that she was a little bit nervous back then, but I told her that she was going to do a fantastic job, and she did.
Yeah.
And from there on, I think that made her feel a little more confident on social media. And she's been doing a fantastic job. I'm surprised how quickly she went from an anonymous user. Well, she was never fully anonymous, but just like, the average person on Naturist Twitter. And then all of a sudden now she's the president
Yeah.
of and I mean, she obviously went through a lot in order to reach the current place she's in, but it just seemed to me so extraordinary how she was very passionate and dedicated, and I don't know. And I honestly don't think I'm worthy of all the recognition she gives me, but I do appreciate that we've always had a really nice relationship. We've been really good friends since.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Well, she's one of those, and this is what we noticed here, really, pretty much out of the gate when we saw her on Twitter and began to communicate with her, is she's truly genuine. She's not
She
an
is.
exhibitionist. For starters, she's not an exhibitionist, which is really huge with us. And secondly, she's never been. It's all about me. You know, look at me. Here I am posing 5,000 times next to my car, another 5,000 times next to my home. And in case you didn't notice, I was naked. You know, a lot of people post that. It's like, folks, you don't need to post 5,000 photos a day of your naked body. If you want to do it, go ahead. We're not going to stop you. But there comes a point where, okay, that's just ridiculous. She's never been ridiculous. She's been totally genuine in everything that she writes and says and promotes. It's always for the right reasons. And I'm sure you picked up on that fairly early as well, right?
Yes, for sure. Linda is super genuine, and she's also the type of person that likes to raise other people. She tries to encourage people, and she tries to, um, you know, I think with the campaigns, she had a really famous campaign, that I am the face of naturism. She wanted to give people more representation. So I believe that everything that Linda does is always in favor of the cause and in favor of the people. I think she really does.
Yeah. Now, we always do as much background checking as we can before a guest comes on, get the information that's out there. We don't pry too deeply, we don't go down that road. But I heard you say once, I believe it was on, in fact, I know it was on another Naturism podcast show. You were born in Mexico, but you did spend a lot of time living in the USA, which is why you speak English so well. People have asked me, if he's born and raised in Mexico, how can he speak English so perfectly? And I heard you tell the story, but then you moved back to Mexico. For starters, is that story correct?
Yes, yes, that's
Okay.
true.
All
When
right.
I was 4 years old, my family moved to the United States. So during 1994, 1995, there was a huge economical crisis in Mexico. My dad was unemployed for a year or so, and he was forced to migrate to the United States, as a lot of people are. And I lived there as a child from age 4 to age 12, moved back when I was 12 years old. So I had to relearn Spanish again. And then after that, I lost a lot of practice and then had to relearn English. So it's always been, I think language is a challenge for me. I guess this process of learning and then relearning makes me speak a little funny, but I am thankful because I was able to develop the accent language from early on.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you were to tell me that you were born and raised in the USA and you've never set foot in Mexico or any Hispanic speaking country, I would believe you. I mean, that's how good your English is. I'm not as skilled in Spanish. I speak a little bit, and I have to stress the word little. I speak a little bit, but I'm guessing your Spanish language, Mexican language, I guess it's called Spanish, is probably equally as good, right?
Yeah, well, we could call it Mexican if we're referring to regionalisms and
Yeah.
expressions and things like that,
Yeah.
because it's actually Spanish is a really interesting language and it varies. I mean, just like English, it varies from place to place.
Oh, yeah. I was talking to somebody who's from Portugal, and he was saying some things to me in Spanish. We were just playing around with the language, and I said, "I don't understand a word that you said." And he started laughing. He said, "Because in Portugal we have our own language. We call it Spanish, but it really isn't." Now I don't know if that's true. I mean, coming from him, I believe him. He seemed like an honest guy, but from different parts around the world, Spanish changes just enough that maybe somebody who's not a native speaker can't pick up on it. Is that fair to say or no?
It is fair to say, but in
Okay.
Portugal, I believe this person speaks Portuguese,
Okay.
which
Okay.
is grammatically very similar. Like if you it's funny because Spanish looks like not properly written Portuguese, and Portuguese looks like improper Spanish, if that makes any sense. But also, it's they're very similar languages, but they are completely different. Yes.
Okay. Now, the other thing that I learned about you along the way is you are not raised in a naturist family necessarily. You discovered it. I have the date in my head or the year in my head, 2013. Something happened
Yes.
in your life that triggered, hey, this is probably the way to go for Hector Martinez. Maybe just tell us what happened back in 2013 to propel you to the world of naturism, nudism.
Well, first of all, I'm impressed, Frank. You're very, very well informed.
All right.
Yes,
We do our best. I appreciate that, though.
you did a fantastic job.
All right.
So I was exposed to naturism well, it wasn't naturism, it was actually public nudity back in 2013 when I was reading the newspaper. I found out that there was a World Naked Bike ride in Guadalajara.
Oh,
That was an interesting experience because I wanted to go and see it for myself and potentially live the experience. But I didn't have a bicycle and I was pretty bad out of shape, so I wasn't able to run behind everyone on a bike. So that was the end of my first experience. I only was managed to take off my shirt because I knew that if I got too far behind, I didn't want to be caught without any pants on. Um, and then back in 2014, I was able to live my first experience. I prepared, had a year in advance to get a bike and everything, and I went on this event. I remember that I was extremely nervous to take off my clothes, but I had to do it. And I'm really happy that I did because it took me longer to take off my clothes than it was for me to feel comfortable and forget that everyone was nude
yeah.
until the end of the event where everyone started dressing I remember that I felt like I wanted to keep that moment for a longer period of time. And I
Mhm.
believe that's something that really transformed my experience and has also, it has also really changed the way that or influenced the way that I do what I do. because I remember how liberating it was, and then how bad I felt that I couldn't find this experience anywhere else.
Hmm.
So I wanted to make my mission to share how great this is, but also to enable people to have this type of experience.
Yeah. And that's what we found here as well is once people try it, because the first reaction you get from people who've never thought about it, never tried, it's like, Frank, are you crazy? Do you think I'm crazy? My clothes are never coming off. And, little by little, you work with people and sometimes they go for it, sometimes they don't. But the ones who go for it then come back and say, why didn't I try this 173 years ago? It's the greatest thing ever. Now, do you remember what triggered that in 2013? You saw the article about the World Naked Bike Ride, but why did that even pique your interest? Had anything happened before that where you had some experiences being clothes free and it kind of felt right?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I have no idea. I grew up in a regular family where nudity was taboo. I don't remember having any type of nude experience. Like I wasn't the type of child that would run around naked and would resist.
Okay.
I didn't have a problem with clothes. It wasn't I wasn't ashamed of my body or anything. It was just something that caught my attention, and immediately I felt the need to live this experience. It was something that I can't describe. I have no idea why it happened, but it did. And the thing is, when I learned about it, I had to wait an entire year to live an experience, but it was something that I was waiting for every day. Like I would think about doing this, I would dream about it. It was just I call it the nudist gen,
Yeah.
the naked gen that activates, and as soon as it activates, there's no going back.
Yeah. Do you remember? Of course, that's been a few years now, but do you recall going there alone and just keeping it quiet to see how things worked out, or did you tell the whole world before you went, or how'd that work out?
My first experience was with Franceli, who
Oh,
is now my ex-wife.
okay.
Um, and she was also a really important part of the entire experience. We were actually we weren't dating back then, but there was chemistry going on, and I invited her to paint my face because I wanted to remain anonymous.
Okay.
And I believe that this experience itself also influenced a lot of our relationship going forward, because something that I really enjoyed was having her support back then.
All right. So you did tell one friend, and she came along. Did she participate, or was she just there to paint your face and keep you in disguise and enjoy the day?
Yeah, pretty much. She didn't want to participate. It took her several years, like 6 more years, in order for her to be willing to be nude in public.
Okay.
But the fact that she was there, she was supportive, she painted my face, which is ironic because I guess a year or so after that, I was all over the place talking about how wonderful nudism was.
Yeah.
But back then, I wanted to have the opportunity of not becoming public if for whatever reason it wasn't an experience that I could vouch for.
Right. Now she's out there quite a bit too now. I mean, she's all over the place in social media as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was first the World Naked Bike Ride experience. Then in 2016, we started NNG, which was our community.
Mhm.
And in 2017, 2018, I started creating content. And I think she started creating content after the pandemic, which was back in 2020, 2021, I
Mhm.
believe,
Okay.
when she started becoming active on social media. So but she was always active behind the scenes. Like she would give me advice, she would help me, she would be very supportive of that. And it's something that we built together. And then she had a job back then, so she decided that it was worth the risk. So she quit her job, and then she became an advocate.
Wow, very good. I didn't realize all that about her. And that is something we hear about here a lot is people want to do what you're doing all of the time, put out content or just post photos if nothing else, but they're afraid of their job. Like, boy, if my boss hears about this, I'm cooked, I'll be fired. And we know that goes on and probably not a lot we can do about that now. Or do you see it differently? Do we have rights around the world where we can say, hey, as long as I don't show up naked at work, you shouldn't have a problem with this? What do you think?
That's an interesting question because I believed exactly the same thing back then. I studied political science and I was very active in political parties, and something that my father especially was really concerned about. He said that I was going to ruin my career
Yeah.
because we actually I actually had the opportunity of being part of government because my friends that were involved back then are now in really high level positions in local government. I guess in my case, I was willing to sacrifice that. I decided that I wanted to go all in and that I didn't care if it ruined my career or whatever. But I have noticed and I have met a lot of people who for one reason or another lost their anonymity at at their jobs, and they kind of expected to be fired or to be seen as weird or creeps or perverts or whatever. There's a lot of stigma associated with social nudity, but it wasn't the case. They ended up being accepted by their boss, their community, their colleagues, and it wasn't a big deal as they imagined it would be. I think it's always a coin toss. Like it could be heads, it could be tails.
Right.
I've also met other people that were fired from their job or lost important projects or things like that. So there is certainly a risk involved, but I do know that as more people are open about it, it becomes something more and more trivial. And I have noticed on social media, for example, at least here in Mexico, I noticed that Cipolite has taken off. And then now there's even a term called cipoliteño, which is a type of person who has a vibe similar to cipolite, and it's
Okay.
something that they're using like as part of mainstream lingo or lingo. I don't know how to say that, but like people, it's just common use term now, which I believe is really important because these types of cultural adaptations are what signal that society is transforming and that people are understanding and are accepting. And it might become something like comic, but still being part of the mainstream, I believe is really important if we actually want to normalize social nudity.
Oh yeah, I have found. I'm guessing you found this too. Part of that falls on us to educate other people, like people in the workplace or your boss. Like maybe tell them up front, hey, here's what I do on the weekends, or here's what I'm going to do, whatever. And here's what it is, by the way. And something that really, really ticked me off years ago, and probably still lingers with me, is I worked at a place where a lot of people, including the boss, were into the whole swingers thing. They weren't into natures, and it never came about. But they enjoyed, having intimate activities with lots of people, and
Mhm.
it was the talk of the town. And they would sometimes openly discuss it. Oh yeah, I was with so and so Friday night, and whoa, it's like, guys, what in the world? I try to get out of those conversations. And I worked with a number of people, some of them the same people who drank alcohol like fish. I mean, they just drank all of the time. And so they're getting drunk. They're having relations with people who are not their husbands or wives. No harm, no foul, no problem. Everybody understood. But being a naturist, going to a naturist club or a nude beach like Frank, boy, that's a little weird, buddy. I thought, you have to be kidding me. So does that just fall on us that we just haven't done a good enough job explaining this, and maybe we ought to up our game a little? What do you think as naturists?
I think that's what I found really important of the campaign that Linda started. I am the face of naturism for us to have more representation because when we imagine a nudist or a swinger or a hippie or whatever social tribe, we have certain expectations. We imagine them to be of certain characteristics, but when we realize that, like, I think this is something that happened with people who consumed marijuana. At first, it was like a specific type of demographic,
Right.
hippies, and people expected people who smoked marijuana to be of certain characteristics. But then, as there's been more and more campaigns to normalize it, we realize that businessmen, that very successful CEOs, or that people that are in really smart scientists or whatever, also consume cannabis. So I believe, and I'm not comparing social nudity to cannabis, but what I'm trying to say is that there's always an expectation of what a person is like if they practice a certain activity or are part of a certain community. And when we realize that when it comes to naturism, there's so much diversity. Like there is no such thing as a naturist in the sense of certain characteristics. It's always different people from different backgrounds that have completely different life stories and are different in affinities. What I consider to be really interesting is that some people would see naturists as liberals, but I've had experience that most of the old school naturists are extremely conservative. And I'm not necessarily talking about politics. I'm referring to socially. Like one would imagine that the naturists are very open sexually, like very
Yeah.
liberal sexually. But a lot of most of the naturists or that I know are the contrary. They keep their sexual life very privately and they don't want to share their sexuality with anyone else. So these are the types of things that I believe that people should understand. And I do believe it's our responsibility to be more transparent. When you have the opportunity to be upfront, you have the opportunity to control a conversation. You can tell
Yeah.
what it is, what it isn't, why. You control the conversation. But when there's a scandal and people realize that, Frank was naked in the river and, whatever, they took a
Yeah.
picture of him and
Yeah.
they could imagine whatever. They can invent whatever story, and then they're in charge of the narrative. But if you have the opportunity to tell your friends, hey, this weekend I'm going to go skinny dip with my family, with my friends, with whatever, and you explain to them what it's about, then if they realize it, then it's no longer news. It's trivial. It's like, yeah, Frank
Yeah.
likes to do that. We know Frank.
Well, I had an experience once. I went to a nudist club, naturist club on it was either on my vacation or on a weekend. It had nothing to do with work. You just went there for the day and really enjoyed it and had a great time. And unfortunately, it's about 2.5, 3 hours from my home, so I couldn't make it a regular deal. And sometime later, I'm guessing 6 months, 9 months later, I was sitting in a meeting with some people, and I was one of the bosses. In fact, I think I was number two at that particular company. I hadn't gotten to the big chair yet, but I was almost there. But I was a number two guy, and we were talking, and these other people said, "Hey, do you know so and so?" I forgot the name. Bill Smith. I said, "No, I don't think so." "Oh, he used to work here." I said, "Well, that's nice, whatever." And they said, "Yeah, he retired early, and he bought this club about 2.5, 3 hours away from here." And I'm thinking, "Yeah, again, right, whatever." I didn't catch on. He said, "Yeah, it's called," and I don't want to say the name of the club. It still exists today. And I thought, "Oh shoot, is he trying to tell me that this Bill Smith guy or whatever his name was knows me?" Which he would have known me. I was a known entity within the company. And would he have reported back, "Hey, Frank showed up at our club, baby"? I think that's exactly what happened. And otherwise, there would have been no point in telling me about this whole story. And so I used that opportunity to launch into, "Oh, yeah, I didn't tell him I went," because, again, I was trying to get to the big chair and I didn't want to mess that up. And maybe that was a mistake on my part. But I did say, "Oh, yeah, I've heard about those clubs. That's, pure naturism, clothes free living for all the right reasons. I guess a lot of people do that. And it's nothing sexual." And I went on to this whole explanation like I'm some expert on it, which, as a naturist, we're self proclaimed experts, I guess, because that's what we do. But it was a semi close call. But at the same time, I got a way, through the back door to kind of educate them. And it was never a problem again. No. Did they know that I did that all of the time, including at home and on weekends and evenings? I don't know. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But the point is, I managed to navigate it just wisely enough that it never became an issue. But to me, it's also sad that I had to do that. You know, if I
Yeah.
go to a baseball game on Saturday, I don't have to spend 3 hours explaining why I went. But you're closed off. Suddenly, you have to explain everything, right?
Yeah, but I do believe that there's an appetite for that. And if we didn't have such a hard time on social media, I believe that being able to educate society would be so much easier. But the interactions that I've had with people, and since I started advocating for the normalization of nudity and naturism, I've been very transparent with everyone that I know. Like, I mean, I don't say, "Hey, my name's Hector and I'm a naturist," but if the conversation comes up, I'm very transparent, and especially like when people ask me, "What do I do for a living?" It's interesting because I meet people, and eventually they're going to ask you what you do for a living.
Yeah.
And that's always a conversation that I don't avoid it, but it's like, okay, here we go. And then, I go all in, and I see it as an opportunity. And most of the time, the reaction is of curiosity, but I don't feel judged. They're like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then I guess I've become so good at detecting who's interested and who isn't because
Yeah.
they start asking questions and follow up questions. And how does this work? And how does this go? And where do you practice? And like this conversation goes there. And it's interesting because at first I wanted to convince people, but then I realized that they convince themselves.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I do is I give them a safe platform in which they can, answer all their questions and think about it. And then it's like an ongoing conversation because we talk about it and they're like, okay. And then we move on to another conversation and maybe another day that we meet, they're like, oh, and I wanted to ask you about this and I wanted to ask you about that.
Good.
So, people have their own process. And if it's something that they're interested in, you don't have to invite them. They'll invite themselves. But
Yeah.
the fact that you are transparent and open about it gives them the reassurance that they need that if they ever want to take part in it, you can help them.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. I even have some neighbors, I don't discuss with my neighbors my personal life. It's a different kind of community and it's just a gossipy community. So the less they know, the better. Maybe the more they know would be better because then they wouldn't make stuff up. But somebody hit me up a few months ago, just walking down the street, and he said, "So is that you hosting this show on naked stuff?" Well, obviously they had found the show, and of course, immediately when somebody says that's like, okay, so you were looking for something when you found the show. You weren't looking for baseball or how to buy a new pair of pants. You were looking for something naked or nudist or naturist. And so yeah, that's me. That's my name, and I'm out there hosting. And they said, "Wow, I didn't know you were one of those." That's his exact quote. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, just kind of wild parties. And he went into the whole thing that you've probably heard a million times too. I said, "Oh no, that has nothing to do with it." I said, "Have you actually listened to the show?" And he hadn't. He only didn't listen to a bit to hear my voice. And he promised to go back. He said, "Okay, I'll go listen to a few episodes and we'll talk again." And that was a few months ago, and maybe a month ago, I saw him again. I said, "You ever get a chance to listen to the show?" He said, "Yes." He goes, "And I have to apologize." He goes, "I thought you were this fairly laid back conservative, again, not politically conservative, just a conservative guy who went through life and took care of business." He goes, "Then I thought suddenly, whoa, he's this big time wild swinger over the top." He goes, "And now I'm back to realizing, yeah, you pretty much have your act together. But it took some effort to get there." That's seemingly unfair, isn't it? But it's the life we lead, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe he was looking for a good time and thought that you could help him with that.
That's possible too. That's very possible. We are talking to Hector Martinez today. He's currently living in Mexico, born in Mexico, moved to the USA for a while, back in Mexico. And you've heard a bit of his story. In 2013, read about the world naked bike ride and just had to try it. So he tried it a year later. And from there, we're going to talk about this in a moment. He became the president of the Mexican Nudist Federation, I believe it's called. And now he's the communications director for the International Naturist Federation. And Hector, before we move on, and this might take up to 6 or 7 hours for you to completely answer this question,
Okay, I'm
but
ready.
but if people want to find you online or communicate with you in any way, you're out there in billions of places. But just go ahead and list them off. Tell us as much as you want. If people want to get a hold of you, find out more about you, join your Patreon, OnlyFans, all that stuff. Just put it out there. What's the best way to do that?
I think the best way to find me, I mean, I can't believe I have to say this. Now it's politically charged, but on Twitter or X,
Yeah.
that's a platform that has been the friendliest to me when it comes to sharing my content. So you can find me at x.com/_ Hector Martinez. And before I go out and just share all my social media, I think the easiest place to find me is if you go to Google and you Google Hector Martinez Nudists, you could find all of my social media. But I'm also, as Frank mentioned, on Patreon. I dedicate full time to the creation of content, and I also advocate for the normalization of nudity. It's something that I haven't really talked about, which might be an interesting conversation, but how we use social media and in crowdsourcing
Hmm.
uh, as tools to do activism. That's what I do with social nudity. So you guys could also find me on Patreon, uh, Hector Martinez, or just in general. If you go to Google, search for Hector Martinez nudist, you'll find me.
Okay. And what I have in front of me is your link tree, which lists everything. And I'll just go from top to bottom. Naked Adventures on Patreon, Indoor Nudism on OnlyFans, and Twitter, Vimeo, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Now, from what I've been told, and that's why we made Twitter, I still call it Twitter. So
It's
I'll just
always
go
going to
with,
be Twitter.
yeah, I'll just
It's
go
always
with
going to
it.
be Twitter.
If they get mad at me, let them get mad at me. I still call it Twitter. But I was told early on, before we even started the show, that Twitter was fairly accepting of the nude body as long as you didn't get sexual and out of control. And that's why we chose that as our main platform when we started. Now, we've since branched out to Blue Sky and Patreon as well.
Hmm.
And obviously, Patreon OnlyFans are going to be accepting. Twitter is accepting. YouTube and Facebook, not so much so, right? Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, well, I actually had a really big channel. I had a channel
Yeah.
with 1.3 million subscribers, over
Yeah.
200 million views. It was
Yeah.
taken down. It was
Oh, it
taken
was?
down.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I lost that channel back in 2020.
Well, I saw some interviews on there. What I saw of you on YouTube was you interviewed people. But as I recall, everybody on the show was clothed. You had clothes on, your guests had clothes on. Is that the one that was taken down or was it something else?
No, that's a channel that I opened after.
Okay.
So yeah, that was supposed to be vlogs, and I was supposed to interview people and things like that. It was just really hard for me to become active on YouTube again after losing my channel. But it was a previous channel that I had. And it was actually interesting because I first started making videos because I realized that explaining to people what social nudity was very complicated,
Mhm.
but showing them was much easier. So
Yes.
if they had access to an event to see how people were hanging out together and what was going on, it was easier for them to understand it, but it also was much more attractive and appealing for them to want to take part in it. So I started creating content. And then back then we wanted to open a landed club. We wanted to have like a clubhouse where people could arrive at whatever time. They could do some work. They could enter classes. They could be like social events going on. But the community was really small, and we didn't really. It wasn't never financially sustainable. But we tried it. We had a crowdfunding campaign, and I used the resources from that campaign to buy a camera, to buy a computer, to start making videos and shooting content and editing it. The campaign wasn't successful in the sense that we wanted to raise $15,000 and we only raised like four, but it
Yeah.
was successful in the sense that it gave me the tools that I needed to continue my my advocacy, which was at the end of the day what I was trying to accomplish. So a failure turned into a success. And then from there on, I first started creating content for the community, NNG. And then as I became president of the Mexican Federation, I wanted to continue to share what was going on, but it was no longer part of the community. So I just changed the channel to Hector Martinez, and I started sharing everything that was taking place in the events, the community, my life, the Federation, and so on.
The very terrific Hector Martinez. I call him Mr. Nudism. That's my own name for him. He's the current communications director for the International Naturist Federation. He is all over the place on social media, and you will find his links and his information in our show notes today. And on next week's show, part 2 of my interview with the very terrific Hector Martinez. Well, you've been listening to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, episode 87 today. We give you a brand new show every Saturday morning at 6 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. Continue to join us. Check us out on our website, nakednudistandnaturist.com, Spotify, Google, Amazon/Audible, Apple Podcasts, and also on Twitter. You can write us anywhere, anytime, anyplace. And we thank you for being with us today. Plan to join us for every single one of our shows here and have your clothes off when you're listening. We have our clothes off when we're broadcasting, enjoying the naturist life.
We clothes-free living for all. Remember to enjoy being naked and join us again for Naked Nudist and Naturist.
We drop a brand new show every Saturday morning, so come back and join us. Have your clothes off when you do for Naked, Nudists, and Naturists. Have a great clothes-free day.